Hello class, Emily here with my friend Blob Ross. This is the puppet I drew a model sheet for, and this is my first attempt at animating the puppet within Character Animator. So I already have some fixed points keeping the body of the bottom of the body along the bottom. There was a lot of bees. I have some dragging points in the arms and the tail, though apparently I need to fix the slime there. I don't think I've ever said that sentence before. And you could see my lip syncing's working, and then my eye is moving around, and my eyebrow. So I really didn't do much other than adding those fixed points and the draggable handles. If we go to the rig mode, you can see there's really not too much added here. A lot of this in Character Animator really comes down to the setup of the file itself. There you can see the fixed and draggable points. And so today I want to talk about just the process of going from your model sheet to Character Animator with Illustrator and or Photoshop in between. So remember, Blob started off as a model sheet, which I posted on Blackboard. I've got it right here. So I came up with Blob last semester when this class first started, and for those of you that turned in your model sheet so far, thank you. They're looking super good. I'm really excited to see your characters animated. So this was an early sketch of Blob. I drew all the phonemes. I did some problem solving in the meantime. At one point, his upper lip was going to be part of his beard. I've taken that away since then. And after you draw your model sheet, you want to create your assets in Photoshop or Illustrator. So what I started with was my model sheet itself. I scanned it and brought it into Illustrator. And there's really no structure to this file. I have everything kind of spread out so I can see it all. And I do recommend that at first with your phonemes, just so that it's easy to adjust consistency, so they're not all just piled on top of each other like they will be in the puppet file. So in Illustrator, I had started creating these files. I wanted to go with consistency with similar strokes and colors. And once I had some shapes and a general idea, I moved on to creating variations of Blob. And so this works from left to right. I'm particularly proud of this one right here. I'm still planning on adding some animated bubbles moving up in him, but I was playing with the eyelid and thought that it's kind of a whole mood right there. I also messed with maybe his beard is too large. It's not. That looks creepy. This was the original. One thing I really wanted to do was make him look gelatinous, so I played around with inner and outer colors and adding these little shines. I did some research online. I actually even looked up slug footage. And then I decided just to make him more cute, thinking about character design. I made his eye a little bit bigger and created some overlap here of his brow and then his eye over his beard. I still want to add this little mustache element, but I'm going to do that later. And so after going through and trying a bunch of variations, I took the features I liked the most and just kind of put them in a test file. I didn't do any organization here either. I just kind of picked and chose what I liked the most from the variations I created. There's only one mouth in here. I didn't bring them all because what I wanted to do was bring those assets into a blank template. So the blank templates are available a few places on Blackboard, week 6 and this week. I can email them to you. There's multiple ways to find them. Hopefully you already have those files. You can start from scratch, but I highly recommend working with one of the blank templates. There's a PSD one as well. And that's because it has all of the layer names and hierarchy. This will make animating your puppet that much easier because it will make it mostly automated. Character Animator is looking for these specific names, and if they're in the right order and spelled the right way, there's very little you'll have to do within Character Animator. I have done it from scratch, and it is not fun having to write this all out. So those blank templates, they're also available within Character Animator under More Puppets. Really, really helpful just to have handy on your computer or hard drive. Remember, anything with a plus sign next to it means it's independent, so it moves on its own, like our eyebrows and our pupils. And so I opened up my template file, and then I did a combination of copying and pasting from that final test that I did, and then I brought in each mouth one by one and brought it into this puppet file. One thing I had to figure out along the way is his mouth just being black against his beard disappeared. So I actually did this little trick, adding an additional stroke using the appearance panel. I copied the initial stroke, and then the one underneath the black one is just a large green one. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see the mouth at all. And so that was just kind of a fast way of getting these different shapes without having to draw something else. On the flip side, I was just working on his arm to make it look a little more gelatinous. There's a feather inside this shape. This is usually something better done in Photoshop, but under Effect, there are quite a few things you can do within Stylize. And if you wanted to take this into Photoshop, you could always export it as a layered Photoshop file. And then all of your layers would transport over as well. So you could start in Photoshop, or you can start in Illustrator and then export into Photoshop for the different effects there. I decided to stay entirely in Illustrator for this one, but I've used both. I do like the flexibility of working with vectors when you're adjusting shapes and things like that. And then once I finished my file, I saved it and imported it into Character Animator. And it just updated because I had made changes to the original. Importing is just a matter of going to File, Import within Character Animator, and then navigating to that PSD or AI file. I'd save it as something different than blank template. So I created a final puppet file here, and then that Illustrator file just creates this little puppet icon, and then I placed it within a scene, which is stuff we've done this semester. So this puppet I've already added some adjustments and handles to. I want to show you just what happens when I bring it in from scratch. So I'm going to go File, Import, or double click in this gray space in the project window. And I'm going to navigate to my file and click Import. Now, one trick, earlier when I tried importing this, I got an error 64. And I looked it up. That's a known error between Illustrator and Character Animator. If I do this now, it should work. But that's because I saved the file differently. This won't happen with Photoshop, but in Illustrator it's a really easy fix. You just want to go File, Save As, give your name, I'm just going to call this Final for Real, because we always name things like that when working. And you want to click Save on this first screen, but on this second screen for Illustrator options, which you probably just zip right through, if it has problems importing, just switch the version to Legacy, which just means before 2020. You might not have issues with it, but that's a known problem between Illustrator and Character Animator, is it can be fussy about importing a file made in the newest Illustrator, but if you save it to Legacy, you shouldn't have a problem. So back in Character Animator, I've just imported this new puppet. You can see it right here. If I double click on it, we go into rig mode. You can see there's no handles or anything yet. These are just the anchor points of where things connect. And so if I go to record, with that puppet selected, I'm just going to click on my new scene button. And you can see we have some work to do here. So I'm going to pin it and work on the rigging in a moment. One thing I usually change right away is the properties. You could see that the pupil is going, it's going right behind the brow, but it's also going to the edge of the eyeball, which I don't want to do. So if I twirled on my eye gaze options, I can decrease the camera strength. If you go too far, it won't really move much at all. I just wanted something less than 100, so it doesn't get too close. I also don't want this eyebrow to move quite so much. I know it's the top of his eyebrow. I know it's not actually an eyebrow. I just marked it as an eyebrow. It's kind of his bangs, I guess. Doesn't matter. I set it as his eyebrow with that layer, and I'm going to go to my face options and turn the eyebrow strength down. Right there. So now that's not as extreme. And then right now my head's tilting everything. I could turn down the head position strength, which isn't going to make it as drastic, but that's where we really want to add our pins. Like right now, if I try to drag anything, there's no handles. So to do that, we want to go into the rig mode. And with this puppet, we just want to add some pins. So I'm going to click on the body layer here, and I'm going to go to my toolbar at the bottom. Remember, there's very little tools in this program. It's really more about modifying assets than creating them. And our pin tool, we can make either fixed points or draggable points. I'm going to add a fixed point at the end here. You could set it to draggable or fixed or dangle over here. And if we just leave that point and go back to record, that looks pretty sluggish, so it's not bad, but let's add some more points in the rig mode. So with my pin tool selected and the layer I'm adding these two highlighted, you can see it already has one for handles. That's what this little number means right here. So I'm going to place two more along the bottom, and we've got 3 points. And when I go back to record, now the base of it stays nice and still. I want to be able to move the arms as well, and when something's not independent, it can't move separately. That's because it doesn't have a mesh applied to it. So in the record mode, I have right arm selected, but it is independent, but there's no way of controlling it without different points. One thing I want to do is move its anchor point up to the shoulder. It's a good idea to do that for all of your different layers. Like so left arm, I want that to connect at the shoulder. If this character had legs, I'd want it to connect at the hips. I'm going to go back to my just selection tool here and select this arm. And if I go to my puppet pin tool, I'm going to add a fixed point at the top and then a draggable point at the bottom. I don't know why Character Animator lets you have a draggable and fixed point, because they cancel each other out. I could just click that off or X out fixed. So I've got a fixed point and a draggable point, and when I go back to record mode, now I can move that limb around. If it wasn't independent, if it didn't have the crown next to it, so in Illustrator or Photoshop, we designate an independent layer with the plus sign, and in Character Animator, that translates into this little crown. It just means that this layer has its own mesh and can be modified separately. If I click off that crown, you'll see its mesh just becomes part of the whole body. And there's still draggable handles, but now it's going to move everything in there, which doesn't look so great, and it's distorting our artwork, which is not something I want. So I'm going to go back to rig mode, and I could fix that by just clicking on my crown icon again. So I think this is looking pretty good. Let's add our draggable point to the left arm as well. So I'm going to click and place a fixed point, click and place a draggable point that's not also fixed. If this was a normal humanoid character, I could also tag the wrists, arms, and shoulders, which will help me with the walk cycle later on. I am planning on doing like a slug cycle with this character. I played with it earlier and it looks pretty weird, but hopefully I could show that to you in the next class. In the next class, I'm going to be finishing up this demo by syncing him up with Bob Ross and putting him in a scene and talking about how to render that in After Effects. You could just render straight from Character Animator as well, but being an After Effects person, I can't help but wanting to add it, and then you could do 3D and cameras. We won't get that crazy. But I still have at least one more lecture where I want to talk about kind of finishing up a project. But really the main thing is to have this character that you can work with and animate. And a big part of that is just having a properly created Photoshop and Illustrator file. If I wanted to make a change right now, I would be able to right-click on a puppet and say Edit Original. Or if I just happen to have that file still open, if I make a change, let's do something obvious, like make this arm yellow for some reason. If I make a change and go back into Character Animator, you can see it updates automatically. So even if you don't think you're done with the puppet itself, you can kind of work out some of these problems as you go and make changes and see how they're going to work in real time. So don't feel like you have to have everything perfect before you bring it into Character Animator. As long as you have that hierarchy in place, it will pretty much just be a plug and play kind of thing. And if it gives you trouble, please contact me and I'll help you with it. I'm going to undo that change. One other thing about using the draggable handles is by default they're set to hold the position that they're in. That's pretty cute. I'm going to make some paint brushes for him. I've already started drawing them in Illustrator, actually, if you go back to this first one. So I'm going to give him a palette and some brushes. Eventually I'm going to make him a little easel. It's like an action figure with all of his accessories. But if you want the draggable handles, it went back to the yellow because that's how I saved it. Let's undo that back in here and save that again. Then it will be right in Character Animator. Alright, so if we wanted these draggable handles to go back to the original position, instead of eye gaze and face, we would go to the very top one, which is dragger. And really it's just after move, hold in place is the default. We would just choose return to rest. And then when we move it, they'll go back to that position. I'm going to add another draggable point in the tail here. So I'm just going to click on the body and I've got a fixed point there. So, I'm going to actually probably want to make the slime a separate independent layer. And then on this body, I can add that dangle point. So remember, if you want something to not be affected by the things around it, it should be an independent layer. And so now I can move this around and then still have the slime doing its thing. I would probably want to add fixed points to this as well, but hopefully you get the idea. Oh, and I've got a cat climbing onto my swivel chair now. I'm not surprised. He really likes being on camera for some reason. His name is Fig. He's very black and fuzzy, and he's about to walk right in front of me while I'm using my web camera, so that's awesome. I should probably wrap it up anyways. I want to keep this shorter. I hope you're having a good time creating your puppets. Like I said, the model sheets are looking awesome. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. There's that tail. If you need any help. And really all I'm looking for your final is the model sheet itself, the character, and then ideally if you could put it into some kind of scene. It doesn't have to be scripted or anything complicated. I'll show an example of that in the next class and post some things up online. You might remember from the very first lecture I showed you some examples of previous students' work. So don't overthink it. I want you to have fun. I want you to just combine all the different things we've learned this semester and bring your character to life. Let's make these move and make them happen and do some cool stuff. So like I said, let me know if you need me, and please be safe out there. Bye!